Hi, everyone, and welcome to a new session with Code with Sally. The session run every Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. For anyone who's joining or watching this video for the first time, you'll find all the recordings on the channel, Code with Sally. We have different playlists. So for the beginner, you will find all the videos related to the beginner sorted oldest to newest in this playlist. We have a new playlist for Agentforce for developers for the sessions we did and the questions and answered. So feel free to check them out. If anyone has a question between now and next session, feel free to send it to me on Slack or LinkedIn, and I will whether reply with a video or reply one-on-one, or I will take it into the next session and discuss the problem with you during the session. So today we went back to the beginner series, and we want to talk together about the debug logs. Debug logs, a lot of people don't pay attention to them, or like try to avoid reading them, or they don't enjoy reading them. So we want to make it easier for everyone who's dealing with debug logs, how to read them, how to get the information that they are looking for out of them. And we'll try to give some tips or like advice how to use it or best practices as well. So we want to understand what's the importance of the debug logs. So the debug logs, usually we go to them to check how certain functionality was like running during the execution. And it can help us whenever we have an issue or a bug. It can help us detect where the bug is or the root cause for it. So it's very important to know how to deal with them. There is other tools or other ways to work with like debugging and getting the information out of Salesforce, but not using out of the box debug logs. And at some point in future sessions, we'll try to cover some of those tools. But for now, we are starting with the basics that everyone has, which is the debug. So Apex provide a lot of information when you are running Apex or checking the debug log. You'll find that it contains a lot of information, and it's not just the debug statements. Like everyone during the previous sessions, when we were always working with the execute anonymous, I was always using System.debug, and we were putting our custom message as the one we have here as an example, and we used to do the execute, and the debug log opens for us, and we were usually taking the debug log and checking the message we have. So some people get the impression that this is only what we can see in the debug log, and I just want to clarify that it's way more than that. So yes, you can see your own debug statements, and you can use System.debug as we were doing to insert your messages. And also on top of that, you will find that without logging some information, you will find details about that. If your code has a SOQL statement or a DML, or you are calling methods, you will find details about those as well in the debug logs. So we'll see together how to find those and how to read it as well. As we mentioned, and we were doing as well in the previous sessions, we were always using System.debug to add your own messages. And I will try to give you some tips or like tricks how to like form your message to be easier for you to find the information you're looking for. Reading the logs, as we said, like it will help you spot exceptions, errors, to find out the root cause for it. You can figure out some data issues by checking the SOQL statements, and if they return data, you wrote a SOQL statement and you were expecting that it will return, let's say, 3 records. It shows only 2, so something is wrong. As well, it can help you detect if there is null values or incorrect values that you were not expecting, or you were expecting different values for it. And also it gives you some summaries of the governor limits, how many SOQL, how many DMLs you consume. And that's something good, like especially if you have a big piece of code that is running, to keep an eye on it when you're checking the logs. So are you close to hit the limit? Are you hitting it? Which limit are you hitting? So it can help you figure out some issues in your code as well while working with it. So that's briefly like what is debug logs, or like why it's important and what type of information like you would be able to see in them. We first, before reading them, we need to know how we can enable the debug logs. So we'll figure it out today together in two ways. The first one is you will have the system, you can use the setup, like you can, two cases where you need to go to the debug logs, whether you are developing and you need to know what happened in the code you are just executing. So you are interested with what's happening with your user. But sometimes you will come to a situation where another user is complaining that they are getting certain error and you don't have enough information about it. So you may need to enable a debug log entry for this user, and then they do the same action again, and then you go check the debug logs for this user and see what's happening. So that's what we will do now. We want to see how you can set it up from Salesforce setup menu. So we'll go and open our org. You will go to the setup here. And the first thing you'll look for here in the quick find, it will be debug logs. And you will click on debug logs here in the left menu. That will open for you this interface. That interface tells me, for example, what if you have different users or different logs enabled for certain users, you can tell it's for what user, what's the log type, the start and end, and the debug level for it. But let's say you want to got a request from another user that they have an error and you want to enable a log for them. You'll click on new here, and you will choose, as beginners, we'll always be working with users. I can give you a brief idea about those. Like this is the automated processes when you have, you want to capture system running operations that are executing and you want to see logs for them. Platform integration will be used like if you want to trace activities by integration, like external apps using APIs. So use that. User is the most common that you will be working with. Apex class and Apex trigger don't like create logs on their own. It's more to override a debug level for the user. So let's say, let's continue and I'll give you an example to understand it more. But most commonly, you will choose the user and then you can search for the user you are interested in. In my case, I just have mine. And you can say, I want to start the log to be from now until what time? Is it an hour? You want it for 2 hours? Maximum, you can have it for 24 hours. Like if I try here to make it 29, it will complain when I hit save. And then you have to choose the log level. Log level, there is this one I just created myself before the session, but you may have certain other types like or other log levels defined by either other users in the org, or it's just by default there for you. So you can see which one you want and you can click on it, or you can decide that you want to create a new debug level. You want to specify what you want. You can give it a name and then you can go for each category. It will tell you which events it will create a log for them, like SOQL execute begin or end. It's also, so you can choose between like, no, you don't want any like entry in it for in the logs, or you can choose like you want to go with the info. So it's small information, warnings only. You want to have more details, so you go to fine. Finest is extremely like maximum details you can get. The advice that we always give, like you don't go and choose finest for everything because that will be overwhelming and you will have a lot of entries in the log that it will be hard for you to read and find the information you want. So always be wise about what level you want for which category. Like if you have, for example, an error in Apex and you want to check what's happening there. So maybe that will tell me like I have to go with finest in the Apex to check it. So it depends on the situation. You can decide what's the like levels you want for each category. So, and that's where the Apex class and Apex trigger can come handy, because you may have, for example, let me open this here. I may have for Apex, let's say the Salesforce Developer Console was, for example, info, for example, for Apex. And I want a specific class where I know that there is a lot of complaints and a lot of issues, and I want for certain class to have it finest. I don't want to come to the Salesforce Dev Console or Apex Override and have here everything as finest for the Apex. So you can choose at the time that you want to create a entity. You choose the entity type to be Apex class and choose the Apex class that you want to override its debug level to be finest, for example. And you choose your class, and you can choose another debug level that will make it more detailed. And the same for Apex triggers. But again, as beginners, we'll be always mainly working with the user, choosing your user, start and end date, when you want to start logging and stop logging, and what are the levels. So that's how you enable it in the UI. And then after that, once it's enabled, if you do an execution or the user you chose here, I have my user only, they do any actions that match the criteria you have in your log, it will create a log record here, like in the debug log list here, you will find an entry for it. What you can do with it, you can download, because sometimes it's too large or you want to share it with someone else. So you can download the file, or you can hit view, and that will open the debug log file for you to go through it. And you will may be overwhelmed at the beginning that there is a lot of text here. We'll learn together in the session how we can read it and how we can figure out the details or the information we are looking for in the debug log. So that's what I wanted to cover here in terms of how you can enable it in the setup menu. So you go to the setup and you go monitoring debug logs, or you simply search for the debug logs. You define a new trace flag for a specific user. As we said, like mainly as beginners, we will be always using users, or even for me, like I've been always mainly using users, rarely where I needed to create an Apex trigger or Apex class trace flag that overrides certain classes to be more detailed. I didn't get the need to do that. We saw together the trace entity types and trace entity name that we have here. When you define a new one. So trace entity type and trace entity name, those first two fields, those are mainly help to tell Salesforce who or what they are tracing. So are we tracing a certain class? Are we tracing a certain user activity for a certain user? So that would tell Salesforce, okay, we need to create a log entry for something or for a certain user. Start and date and expiration date will be the next two fields we have here. And as we mentioned, like it defines how long this debug log trace will be active, like how long or when should we keep an eye like on the certain user with their activity and log their activities in the debug log. It would not be forever. And that's a kind of a problem with debug logs, because sometimes when you are in production, you won't have an active log for all the user all the time. So sometimes when the user say, okay, I have an issue, you don't have a log for it because you don't have a trace flag active for this user at the time. So sometimes we add a record or a trace flag for the user and ask them to try to reproduce it so we get the information. Or the other way to do it is that you have your error handling that save detailed error messages in a custom object, for example, that you keep track of the errors in it, or there is other tools like that you can use, like Nebula for logging, and that's something as well we'll try to cover it in the future. But the start and expiration date controls how long we'll have the trace flag active and keep adding in the logs. The debug level, it controls how detailed the logs are. We said like it starts from none, error, warning. It can go to finest. And if you're running into governor, limit error, or bugs or issues with the Apex, it's recommended at that time that you can increase the Apex code, the system category, and the database to debug or finer. And again, be careful with finest because finest give you so much information and sometimes it will be very overwhelming to find out what's the issue or where is the issue. Other way is that usually, or that's for me easier when I'm developing at least, I can have my debug and my developer console open. And that will always, like if, for example, I run this code and even don't open a log, it will create a log entry for me here. So, and I can see it's unread and I can open it and go through it or use the debug log. So the developer console is another way where you can go and check the logs, but be careful, this will only show the logs for your current user. So if I need to see the logs for Hildy or Bill, but not mine, I cannot do it from the developer console unless I am logged in as their user. If I'm logged in as Sally, only the user logs that I will see will always for my user. So just be careful with that. So that's where you would be able to see it. And from the debug menu, you can open and change log levels. That's an easy, quick way. It will show it to you that the green ones will be the ones that are running. So there is one is general, it's dev, SFDC, dev console. You can add or change levels here, like by adding or changing, you can add another level or another category or change the categories here. Let's say from finest, I will do finer and save. And I can see that I have, when I was like preparing for the session, I had created one from the setup menu for the math utility. And it was like you will see here, the log type for it is class tracing. Here I was using the SFDC dev console, but I could choose the Apex override instead, for example. So that's something you define here or in the interface. So that tells like the logs. Now, if I have a math utility that is running, by default, my user has SFDC dev console, but for the math utility, it will use the Apex override. So that means if I have for all the classes, the finer is the level of the logs or fine. For the math utility, it's using Apex override. So in that case, it will use the finest level. So that gives you a control over if you want to have for a specific class, specific trigger that you are working on, and you want to make the logs more detailed for those, you can come and add them here. So it shows to you the Apex trigger and class overrides. And the user for all users, that's something that we defined as well in the user interface. But again, as beginners, you don't need to worry about overriding for Apex or trigger. Simply knows that mainly it's easier, or at least that's my opinion, it's easier to come and deal with the logs and read them and open them from the developer console. You need to have it open. So if you're working on LWC or in like batch job and you are doing some changes and testing it, have your developer console open. It will create logs for your user. If you need to see logs from another user, that's where you need to go to the setup and create the user trace flag for this user. It will be, and make sure it's active, it's running now, and let them do the action that they want or log in as those users, and it will create the logs for you. If you are logged in as this user, another user as Hildy or as Bill or someone else, that means the developer console will show you the logs of the other user at the moment because you're logged in as this user. So any questions so far? There is a question. So from developer console, we just see as our own user and cannot see other user unless if logged in as user. But in the setup, yes. So in the setup, you can see all the users or all the trace logs, like anything that is active and it's not expired. Like you will still have the records here, but those are expired. For example, this was until the 23rd of March. So even though I see the user trace flag here, but I won't see logs for them because they are expired. So for any non-expired user trace flag, you'll start seeing the logs for them here, even if it's another user. In the developer console, yes, you will see only your own user logs, or if you are logged in as another user, you'll see the logs for this other user, not yours. So it depends on the user you are used to log in as and opening the developer console with. Okay, so that's what we saw together. We saw using developer console. We saw how we can access the developer console, and we saw that you can see only for your own user. We took an idea about the change log to maximize what you want to capture, and that's where we open. Where is the developer console? We opened the debug change log, and we saw like what levels we have, what is expiring, and we can change the levels here. So that's what we are referring to here. We used the log tab to view and open recent logs, and that's what we were doing the previous sessions, that whenever you have a log or you execute anonymous, it opens by default, but again, you can go by the logs here. You'll see any logs. So if, for example, I have a log enabled for an Apex that an LWC calls or use, and I go do the action, I will see a new entry here, and I will say, it will say unread, and you can open and choose which one to open and check. One thing that I try to do, because sometimes, especially if you have a lot of automation or a lot of like thing going on, you want to test something specific. Sometimes it gets crowded and you see a lot of unread logs, and sometimes it can be hard for you. So you can go here and you say, okay, I want to, from debug, clear and clear log panel. So that will clear the log panel for you. So if, for example, now I open the execute anonymous and hit execute, I will see only the row or the rows that will get created from my action. So sometimes we tend to do that while we are working, because sometimes it gets overwhelming when you see like 20, 30 debug logs, all of them unread, and you don't know which one you need to open or start checking. So sometimes this clearing the logs is a good idea. In the past, when I didn't know about this clear command from here, I used just to refresh the developer console. So it opens for me the debug log here empty. Okay, so reading. Like now we saw how we can enable it and how we can have logs to see it. So reading debug logs are detailed records. Like it will, as we said, like you can have the output from your System.debug and the messages you are inserting. And also it can have like a system generated messages as well in the log. So it's very detailed, and it depends on the level of the logging you chose, finer, finest, info. It will vary in the terms of how much details you'll have there. We mentioned that it will help you trace the logic, find the issues in the database or SOQL and help you figure out issues. But all of that will happen only when we learn how to read it, because a lot of developers rely only on their system.debug messages, but they don't know how to read the logs. Key components you will see in the log, and we'll try to do it together now. You'll find something called user debug. User debug, this will be your messages, custom messages. You can see SOQL execute begin and SOQL execute end, and that's when a SOQL query runs. It can tell you DML begin and end when you have inserted, updated, deleted records. It will give you keyword DML begin. You can see exception thrown, and that's whenever there is an exception in the system that was thrown, and it will tell you the line or how it happened. And at the end, you will have limit usage, like what are the limits or the governor limits in the consumption we have so far. So let me open here the developer console. I created here like a simple class and a method just to simulate those entries in the debug log so we can see it together. So I created the system.debug, so that should go with the user debug. I have here a SOQL in the debug statement, another DML I'm updating. Then I'm doing some iteration and some loops and showing some data. I'm trying here to have an exception and just the debug log at the end. So this method on its own, like it's not doing anything, but it's just to help me demonstrate how to read the log. So if I go to execute anonymous, it's static method. So I'll use the class name dot the method name, run demo, and execute. Okay, so that will open for us the logs. And usually what people do, go directly to debug only. So when you do debug only, it will show us like the messages, the debug statements that you have, the system.debug. So you will see all of that here in the debug statement. And yes, I knew recently in one of Red Woman cohort, I didn't know myself that we can have emojis here or images, but it's something interesting because it makes it more visual and even easier sometimes to catch like this is an exception or something bad. This is something good that happened. Like it can help you see some entries in the log faster or easier. But today we don't want to focus on only the bug. We want to go beyond that. One checkbox I find it useful, you'll find here along the details that we'll see in the log, there is some extra details that it will be there, like the heap size, some extra details that will be added to the logs. Sometimes it make it harder to read, and it's not related to the code like that I'm executing. It's something that Salesforce does for us or keep it in the log. So sometimes I prefer to say, okay, I'm interested in whatever got inserted in the log because of the code like running specifically to see it. Let's learn together how to read it. So the timestamp will tell you like the time each statement got executed. So it's ordered from the older to the newest at the end. Event, that will take you to like user debug or code unit finished or method entry or SOQL execute begin and end. So it will be those keywords kind of, and more than what we have here in the slide. You have more, but it's keywords, like it's more like the category or what event happened to create this entry for you. The detail column here, it will give you more information about what's happening or what it exactly happened there. So here, codes unit started, that means the execute anonymous started. Then we'll find here, it says like we have debug.runDemo, the method that we tried. Then we did the debug. starting. And I want to remind you, it will go line by line. If anyone attended the previous sessions when we were explaining things, I was always saying, like, let's do mental debug. And we were always saying, okay, together, what will happen in this line? Then what will happen in this line? So we are at this line. So it tells me the line number and that it's a debug, and will show me the message. So here between the square bracket, it's line 4, it's a debug, and what's the message that we did the debug for. Then it tells me line 7, we have a SOQL statement. If I go to line 7, that's my SOQL statement. So it will go line by line, same way as we were doing the debug by ourselves mentally. So here it tells me, like, you have a SOQL execute begin, it's line 7. And what's this statement that we got, like, it's running? The end, and it's still line 7. And it tells me that it returned only one row. So you can see square bracket is the line, then returned row is 1. Then here it tells me that there is a debug statement in line 8, and it printed this message. Then we have a DML at line 12. Let's go here. So you will find that it's 8 and jump to 12. We have in line 12 a DML begin, and that's that we created an account. And be careful here, the DML, it started here, and you'll find that it will end DML where, so all of that, you'll find it ended here. So it's the DML started at line 12 that we inserted an account, and there is a lot of things happening in between, and then the DML of line 12 ended here. Why? Because we have a trigger and trigger handler that is running. So by knowing that you have always DML begin and end, you can tell, like, this is the start and this is the end, and knowing the line number 2 as well. So you know that this is the start and this is the end for it. And then you can tell that here another code unit started, which is the trigger, and it called a method for the trigger handler, and it's finished the method here and giving you different details like handle before insert, annual. So it's all of that, it's within the trigger and what's happening there. And again, it has some DMLs, have some actions. So let's say you don't care and you know that the trigger is working fine, you can skip all of that. You know that this is where it started and this is where it ended. So let me clear this. Okay, so we finished here. This is my DML and where it ended. Again, it goes and it tells you what's the debug statement. We have the for loop, and it's all debug statements. And then you will see another event, which is the execution. It will tell me that it happened in line 22. So let's say you know an exception happened, you can go and search for exception thrown, and you can tell what's the line. So here it tells me line 22, and line 22 is here. So it tells me exactly which line caused the exception to happen. So that's the exception. Again, debug statement, and then we finished the run demo, finished. It did duplicate detector. This is something I didn't do. It's just Salesforce. Finish the duplicate detector, and then the execute anonymous finished. So it tells you those details line by line. And again, like when I was working on it, let's say if we change the logs level, and I change here from Apex code from fine to finest, and I say okay, and I will run this again, I will find more details. than what we just saw together. So I do execution, and I will open this big. You'll find more details, like, for example, we didn't see from line 8, it went to line 12 when we had the fine. With the fineness, it tells me, okay, statement executed in line 11. Line 11 was this line. So it gave me more details, and it tells me, okay, you gave the name, this dot name, you assign it to the debug log test. So square bracket is 11, which is the line, and it tells me the variable, this dot name, you give it the debug log test. So if I go there, I'll find that I give the name debug log test as it's saying. And then it says in line 11, you are giving new account, you are creating a new account and giving this object to it, like the name is debug log test. So I can say, like, yes, we are creating a new account, and then give me that. Then it will go to line 12. So that's kind of the difference. The more you will have finest or finer, it will have more details. Like we didn't have this here. We would jump from line 8 to line 12. We didn't have the details of the parameters passed, or line 11 that we have this method, or like creating a new account, and the parameters, what are the values. So that's something you keep in mind. And the same, like you'll find everything here will have more details, and the log file is more bigger, but keep it like it's something, it's up to you to choose whether you want to go to this level or of details, or you want it smaller, easier to read, or you want to override for a certain apex. But in general, that's how you can read. Like the timestamp tells you the time. The event will help you match. If something said start or entry, it will have an exit. So it can tell you, for example, here, this is a method entry. This is a method exit for it. Another method entry, you can search where is the exit. So it can help you figure out if you have a start and end, what's happening, and you can ignore the section that you are not interested in, trigger or trigger handler, you are not interested in them, so you can skip. A statement execute, it doesn't have start and end, but SOQL begin, it has start, the end will tell you the number of rows. So it's good to know here, for example, we didn't see it in the previous one, the variable assignment. That's because we have now finest. So it tells you that we are assigning a variable, the name and the new account itself. So the event are keywords that the more you read simple and more complex logs, you will start knowing those keywords. You don't need to memorize them, but it will help you get familiar on finding out like the things that you're looking for in the log. And here mostly is the number of the rows. And I want just to highlight something. This is here code unit started for the trigger. When it will have, or the trigger handler, when it will have, when we are within the trigger and trigger handler, the rows numbers will be the rows numbers in the handler. It's not the row number in the code you are executing. So that's why you need to know, did I move to another area in the code, like trigger or trigger handler, so you can keep up with the rows. So my advice is that you can try to create a simple trigger with a trigger handler or a simple utility or something, and try enabling your logs, make it finer, finest, stay with the level, see which level give you more information, and try to trace it. And the more you will do that, the more you will appreciate as well when we were saying mental debug, because you'll find it's doing exactly what we were doing when we were thinking out loud together, how each line will be executed, because we were always saying, okay, what will happen in this line? What do you expect out of this line? It's the same as the logs. It's taking line by line and telling you what's happening or what's the output from it. So that's how you can read it. It's not something that you will start reading it tomorrow and feel comfortable with, but my advice, start with something simple, make it more complex, and start reading the logs, playing with the log levels, and get more comfortable reading them, because it will help you in real life. Something I forgot to mention to you or show it to you live during the session, so I want just to take a quick look on it. We saw together, we had the log and we went one by one, line by line, and read it, and we saw the difference when we had finest versus the lower level of the logs. But in both cases, I had executable. We said that's related to the code I'm executing directly, what's happening. So I'm not showing all the details that Salesforce can be adding, and some of them are the limits. So if you remove executable, you'll find that we have way more data, some of them heap allocations, other stuff as well. And that's why, for example, when I was showing you during the session, I ticked on executable, so we don't have all those details. But let's say I keep it now. If I go down, and now it's bigger because I have everything, at the end, you notice that there will be a limit usage summary. You will always have it at the end of your debug logs. It will tell you through this transaction or like the code that got executed from start to end, what was the number of SOQL queries we had, how many query rows we returned, so. So it will give you a limit usage, how much used from your limits. So it's a good idea to look into such numbers when you are checking or reading your logs to make sure you are not on the edge to hit the limits. If you find yourself on the edge to hit the limit, that means maybe there is something you can enhance or modify in your code to fix it. So this part is the part that I'm referring to, the limit usage that we have here at the end. It's useful. It will give you some details about your limit usage during the execution from the debug log. So it's good to keep an eye on this. We forgot to mention it or show it during the session because we had the executable ticked. So it's a good thing to show it to you if you are watching the recording offline. Okay, so the next is I want to take some moment to tell you some best practices from my opinion. It doesn't have to be exactly what everyone should follow, but don't overkill or use millions of System.debug messages. Use it wisely whenever there is a need or you want to check something. Yes, use it, but don't use it everywhere for each line. If you have a 10-line method, you won't have before line 1 and after line 1 and between line 3. You shouldn't have that much. So use it wisely, because that will add more user logs for you and more messages, which will make it harder for you to read. Structure your messages and try to make it clean or add some tags to it. In other words, if you are writing a debug statement, you can have something like that. I can have I reach here, and then you can have a debug statement say X and something went wrong. That will be visible for you, yes, when it's printed, but it's hard to, when you have a class that is calling to create an account and trigger handler, it's harder for you to figure it out. I would prefer that you say, okay, this is type of an info. You can start with info, or this is mainly for debugging, or when you are logging an error, you can start with an error. And as well, if you are printing, let's say, account name, don't say, okay, I will print System.debug account name. It's hard for me to know, when I see test account, that this was the account name. Say here, input, or here I'm debugging account name. So start with any prefix that makes sense to you, that make it easier for you if you are doing info versus debug versus error. Be specific. If you have variable that you're printing, tell me what you're printing in the text before appending the value. And the error, be descriptive what you are displaying as well. The other thing I would say that sometimes I like to do, sometimes you know that you are putting temporary debug statements and you have a lot of debug statements in the org, and maybe we are 10 developers and each of us has their own debug statements, and it's hard to figure out the information that I want. Sometimes I like to do like info, and I can say Sally. And that means when I print this, let's say here, I can print and execute. When I will see the debug logs, and it's running, okay. Debug log, I will see Sally and Hildy, and I can be 10 developers each. We have our logs, and it's harder to find. If I know that I'm looking for my own only, I can do a filter here. So I can say, I want everything that has underscore Sally. So I can focus on the debug statements and the logs that I entered and ignore the other ones. If I want to see only the errors that are related to me, I can say square bracket error. Did I spell it wrong? It was info. Okay, so error, is it? Okay, yeah, it's case sensitive. So I have error and then Sally. So I want to just get the error statements that I generated or printed. So using a certain structure, it's not something you have to do the same way I'm doing. It's just a suggestion, up to you, but make it meaningful. Have tags in a way or another to make it easier for you. If you're printing a variable or something, include what you are trying to print, like a description for it, like account name, student age, number of records returned. So it's easy to know, like if you see five what? So you know what's happening. Log levels as adjusted in the debug state setting to control what's captured. And that's something like I can encourage you to do, because the finest will be overwhelming if you use it everywhere. But play with the levels, see with the examples you are running, be comfortable what's happening with each and what's the detail level. Like, do you need to, it tells you like the variable assignments when you call a method and what's the value assigned to each variable or not. It's up to you. Like you can go to this level. In production, usually we don't like to have debug statements all over the code and that they are running in production and printing. And sometimes like you want to print detail of the account or your contact in dev you are developing, but if you log that in production, it can be an issue because you may be logging sensitive data. So be mindful. Usually, like in some teams I work with, there was a policy that we won't have the bug statements in the code when we move forward with the pull request to merge our changes, and that's to avoid any logging in production. I saw other teams as well doing something similar like that. I would put it like conditional. Like sometimes they have, this is, let's assume logging control. That's something we didn't like cover in our session yet. A custom setting or custom setting, like you can have a custom setting that tells me, okay, I want to log for a certain user, or I want to log errors. You can do that and have conditional statements that check the custom setting. If it's enabling logging, you log. So by default, it's disabled in no logging in production. But let's say you have an issue or production issue and you want to enable it temporary, you don't have to go do code change to enable or insert statement for the bug statements. You can control it on and off from the custom setting. And we'll learn more about the custom setting and the logic, how to use it in future sessions as well. But something to keep in mind, be mindful. We don't like in production hundreds or some teams any debug statement. And that's why as well, it's a good idea to discuss with the team. Logging errors will happen where? Like, are we relying on the debug logs? with custom like conditional statements like that with the custom setting that we log only errors in production. But again, if the log user trace flag is not enabled, you don't see it. The best would be to discuss, are we creating our own custom object? We keep the errors and we clean it on periodically basis with a scheduler to clear the records so we don't keep throwing the object, or we are using other tools or other packages out there. And that's where, for example, I would recommend Nebula, and we'll cover it in one of the sessions as well and see how we can use it to log errors. But be careful, don't move debug statements in production blindly or too much without at least conditional statements that can control to have it or not. I hope the session was useful, and that will be the end of the beginner session in the series of beginner. And from next time, we'll explore something else related to Apex as well. Any questions?
Sally, I have a question. This is Conrad. So I have heard this before about don't use debug statements in production because you can overwhelm the logs. So, and this environment is new to me. So I'm trying to understand what is the like corporate standard for your errors? I mean, do you create custom object to store important messages so it doesn't impact the system, or what is the normal operation in developing code for an enterprise?
Okay, so I will tell you based on my experience. Maybe other people will have other answers, or based on their experience, they have something different. I'm not saying that what I will say is 100% right, regardless. But based on my experience, I had two ways to do it. One way, we had our custom object for keeping the errors or the important messages, and we design the object together to have like it's coming from which class, which user, the time, the line, to keep the details of the error when there is an error. And we built on top of that a utility class where we can call when there is an exception, exception log dot error to log it, and so on. So, and we had that framework in place, and we had our Apex batch that run, let's say, once per week to clear old logs because we don't want the object to keep growing and consuming a lot of space. So that one way that we did it, and it was from A to Z custom utility object, the batch job to clear. Recently as well, I used Nebula Logger, and that's something we would love to cover it in one of our sessions. And that's, again, it's similar to what we have built custom, but it's more advanced. It keeps more detail. It can be logging issues or information from LWC as well, from flows as well. And it shows to you like the limits. If you're logging some information, can tell you at this point, after this call in Apex, what's the limit so far? After calling a flow and it does its work, it can tell you what are the limits as well. So it's more advanced than the custom thing that we built, because it's open source. Like you can download, like you can use it, install it, and use it, and you can see the code for it, and you can suggest changes or use and take advantage of what's happening. So it's a good idea to use something already built and tested and not to start from scratch. But again, it depends. Some people sometimes don't feel like, for example, using Nebula, it will be overkill or it's too much work. I want to just have a simple object with two fields and batch job to clear it, and that's it. So it's a discussion within the team whether we will go with something custom or something like that. Rarely where we depend on the logs, we depend only on something like that to keep it, because the logs is risky, because if you don't have a user trace flag enabled at the time, you cannot see the logs for this user when the error happened. But if you have a better error handling, using Nebula or using custom development with your custom object, you're always having the details there.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you everyone for attending. I hope it was useful for you, and I will see you next week with a new series. We ended the beginner series, and if you have any questions about it or about other stuff, please message me.